Hi there, subscribers. Hope you guys are having a great Saturday. It's the February the 22nd. I just wanted to look again at the unfolding of the situation of the coronavirus because the emphasis has certainly seemed to shift away from China. So I wanted to look at a few of the developments overnight, the soaring cases in South Korea, in Italy, to a less extent about Iran, because there's not too much information coming out of there. In response to a question from one of you, is this really a pandemic or a virus, or is it just a normal cold? Well, the thing is, I'm keeping an open mind about it. If you remember in my very first broadcast, I said that how do you create a crisis in the minds of the public? All you do is report on it, very similar to stabbings. You know, they're reporting on it for 2 weeks. It seems like an escalating crisis that's totally out of hand. Then it totally drops out of the news. So what this could be is a very ordinary cold or flu virus, perhaps a new strain, and it could be being totally overemphasized in the media in order to trial run quarantine systems, martial law, test the readiness of various countries around the world to handle epidemics. So we don't know really if it's part of a drill. I'd certainly could keep an open mind about that, because really these figures, it's horrible for the people who have it, it's tragic for the people who die, but in terms of numbers comparatively worldwide, we are still talking minutely small numbers, but quite a lot of panic and quite a lot of disruption, which does show you that any virus doesn't have to actually be hugely deadly or spreading rapidly in many countries in order to create a crisis. But what we don't know really is how quickly it's spreading, because so many people are asymptomatic and so many people have mild symptoms. So we still don't know whether in following seasons, like at the end of this year in the Northern Hemisphere winter, will it come back stronger? Or will people who get it now get it later? I mean, they're really talking about reinfections occurring where people are cleared, they apparently seem well, and then they come down with it again. So we're not quite sure of how biologically humans are going to react to this, how much it's going to mutate, and what the longer term effects of it are. So what we can do right now is just look at a few of the cases. So in Italy's Lombardy area, that's where there's been an outbreak. The cases in Italy have rapidly climbed to I think it's over 50 now. And Lombardy is kind of the region, if you think about traveling from Venice through Verona to Milan, that kind of region in the northeast of Italy. Cities with populations combined of 50,000 have now been shut down, where people are being encouraged to stay at home, and they're shutting, should I say, schools and whatnot, just encouraging people to stay at home. Very similar to the city of Qom in Iran, where they're closing schools and universities and colleges, and also encouraging a semi-lockdown. So in Italy, apparently, it was originally a visitor from China who met with a lady in Italy. She contracted it. She went on to spread it at a cafe that she frequented and in other areas. So she almost acted as a super spreader, and then it's spread throughout that area of Italy. There's been 2 deaths in Italy now. A woman and a construction worker. I think they were both in their 50s. So when we look at South Korea, the infections skyrocketed overnight. There are now 340 infections in South Korea, 2 deaths. Most of the infections, in fact, half of those, are linked to a church in the Daegu area of Wondok in South Korea. Now, I notice in the media here, and also in the media in the Far East, they're trying to slur this church as being more like a cult. So in other words, I think they're trying to almost dehumanize the victims and put blame on the church rather than on the virus. Because why they're describing it as a cult, we don't really know if that's the fact. But they're also saying these people of the church have poor hygiene standards. They sit on the floor, they have a lot of quite close contact, there's not adequate toilet facilities at the church. But my gosh, worldwide there are millions of scenarios a lot worse than that, or at least comparable. I mean, just think of the tube. That's an unhygienic situation. I mean, if the guy standing near you gets a dirty thought, you'll feel it. You think of the contamination in many different areas with people in close quarters. I don't know why they're trying to kind of smear this church. But patient number 31 in South Korea, who was a woman, she attended the church where it's believed she spread it. She also attended a funeral at a hospital. Yes, I do mean to say a funeral at a hospital. And now the virus is going around the hospital quite rampantly. So numbers in South Korea are rising. However, the numbers for both Wuhan, Hubei province as a whole, and China as a whole were extremely small. I think it was under 300 for Hubei province, including Wuhan, yesterday. So while the numbers in China appear to be dropping, what's very interesting is that they've now requisitioned 3 cruise liners for Wuhan. Now, Wuhan is inland, but it's on the Yangtze River. And so they are sending these cruise liners to house thousands of extra medical staff who are being sent to Wuhan. And they're talking of building as many as 17 of these new makeshift hospital camp things. So if it's under control, as it appears to be from the numbers, which are dropping day on day, by next week they could be virtually nothing, then why on earth are they needing to draft in all these extra medical people and create all these hospitals? That seems totally contradictory. Another weird thing is, if you remember, about a week ago, the province of Hubei changed the way they counted cases, which caused a spike in one day. Then they changed back to counting, and now they're going to change back again. So they keep changing the counting method. I think this is all a little bit of a way of just kind of confusing the issue with numbers and taking the attention off it. There have been more cases in Japan. The latest case was a woman in a province near Tokyo who apparently she's a teacher and she had symptoms, but she continued traveling on the train and teaching for a week. I think she did get medical advice, wasn't diagnosed, but then carried on teaching at the primary school for a week, and she also lives with her husband and children, so that could possibly be a spike coming in that area of Japan. In America, they're currently saying that only the states of Illinois, Nebraska, California, and Washington State have testing kits. Why they have testing kits in Nebraska is because a lot of the people from the cruise ship, I think, are being sent to Omaha, the evacuees. Other evacuees have been sent to San Diego, and there was initially a spike in Seattle, or in the Seattle area. So they do have testing kits there, but they're not available in the rest of America, which is probably why the American numbers are so down. We sat at 9 cases in the UK, so I'm really wondering if they don't have adequate testing kits here, because they were doing a lot of tests early on. We heard of sort of 200-300 being tested a day, and now I'm not quite sure. We haven't heard those stories. I don't know what's going on with testing kits. So cases in Iran up to 28. As I said, they've been increasing in Italy, increasing in Dubai, slight increases in Hong Kong and Singapore. And the death in Italy was the first death of a person who hadn't actually either come over from China or was Chinese. The other death in Europe was in France, and that was a Chinese person of 80 years old who traveled to visit France from Wuhan. So the death in Italy is quite significant because it's the first death in Europe of a person living in Europe who hadn't traveled to China. So in that way, it was quite significant. So I'd just like to end off by saying I'm keeping an open mind about this. I do think it's somewhat of an exercise. I do believe people are actually getting sick with the virus, but it's being used as an exercise. But I would just say to everybody that isn't the real epidemic, unfortunately, I hate to say it, cancer. Imagine if we had a ticker tape coming across the news every day of the amount of people that were either diagnosed on that day or died on that day of cancer. There would be millions, possibly billions in this ticker tape every day, and people would be alarmed quite readily, because really that is the real epidemic. That is the real thing that people are getting and dying of it. You know, these flus come and go, but that is, I think, is the big epidemic facing us. And do you know that Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland are the countries that have the highest incidence of cancer? Now, I wouldn't really have associated those countries with the highest incidence. I would have thought they would possibly have been in countries maybe like Russia, Ukraine, because Chernobyl, I'm thinking of that, or other countries where we have lower living standards, poor health, and maybe a lot of pollution. So I just wanted to say as well, I reported on a broadcast the other day that it's roughly split evenly between males and females getting this virus. However, it seems really sketchy. I mean, we can't trust the numbers coming out of China, because as Mandy Rice Davis said, they would say that, wouldn't they? So obviously the Chinese would say numbers were dropping, wouldn't they? So we don't have reliable stats to determine age groups, male, female. But some people have suggested that more males are passing away in China or contracting this disease. But do you know that in China, 50% of men smoke, whereas only 2% of women smoke? So that definitely could account for why men might be more vulnerable. Quite a crazy statistic, that, isn't it? Okay, so I just wanted to end off with that, and I'll bring you any more news on it. It's, as I would say, it's one of the most significant stories of the year, and that's why I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about it. When we look back at 2020 and years to come, we will think of this outbreak. And so, anything could happen. Just to mention, I know some people are interested in the locust story. It interests me because when Jupiter conjuncted Pluto last, there was a famine, the famine that led to Live Aid and the concert with Bob Geldof. And it seems now that these locusts are devouring crops and the swarms are spreading. I mean, it's in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Tanzania, Kenya, spreading to Uganda. Apparently, these desert locusts can travel 1,000 miles a day, and in one day they can devour enough crops that would feed 35,000 people for a month. So we're talking a major crisis with these locusts that could lead to another mass famine, and that could be potentially far, far more deadly than anything that could happen with this coronavirus. They're totally underreported. I know someone said on the stream there are locust plagues every year. There probably are, but this one definitely seems more, a lot more, deadly in terms of the crops and the potential, starvation. And like I say, it does link back to a period of Jupiter-Pluto when there was mass famine in that particular region, namely Ethiopia. So I hope you're all having a good day. Listen, just stay safe, guys. Eat well. Take your vitamin C. I recommend acerola cherry because it's a natural vitamin C. Because do you know that some of the way the vitamins are made are quite gross, actually? And a lot of vitamins are actually made in China. So there may be a shortage of vitamins. So it's best to stick to things you can get hold of, like the acerola cherry powder. Very good source of vitamin C, colloidal silver, and definitely take your vitamin D12. I take between 3,000 and 4,000 ICUs, but you don't have to take my advice. I'm not a medical person, but that's what I would be doing. Have a great day.